Welcome back. Bottom of the hour. I'm Brooke Baldwin, and a verdict has absolutely rocked the city of Fullerton, California. Two former officers were on trial for beating a homeless man so badly. I have to warn you, the images you are about to see of him are disturbing. They're graphic, so just let me give you a minute. Here it is. This was Kelly Thomas in July of 2012. He died 5 days after 6 officers restrained him in a parking lot. Now, Thomas, who was schizophrenic, refused to listen to their orders. And despite what you saw in that photo, a jury found Kelly Thomas was not a victim of a crime. These two men, who no longer work for Fullerton Police, have been acquitted on all the charges listed here. Here are these two former officers. Part of the evidence jurors saw in this courtroom was surveillance video of this entire encounter. So again, we'll play part of this for you, but a warning, it is tough to hear.
So he's got together already in the front? He's in the front. In the front. Okay, the best way I can
because of the fight.
Okay, wait, I don't want to take those off. He's still going to fight. Yeah.
Yeah. He's so fine, dude.
Relax. 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 Okay, we get
what's this guy's name?
That around to us. You don't even know. We're trying to get it. Should we pull him up? Relax. Relax. Oh, we pull this legs up.
On the phone with me now, Kelly Thomas's father, Ron Thomas. Mr. Thomas, I am sorry about your son. Let me just begin with, I am sure you have seen that video so many times, but to hear your grown son crying for you, what's that like all these months later?
Well, it's still horrifying, especially the segment you played. Well, those were the very last words of his life, and you could hear him getting slower and more labored in his breathing as he was calling for me. And a 37-year-old man reverting back to Daddy, they're killing me. I mean, just what he went through, the pain, the horror from on-duty police officers, it's unfathomable, and then they get away with it completely. Not even an excessive force charge. How can this be?
After hearing Mr. Thomas not guilty, the verdicts read 4 times yesterday. Can you just take me inside that courtroom? Tell me your initial few thoughts.
I prepared myself for it. I couldn't believe once again that they were found not guilty on all charges. And we all realize not guilty does not mean they were found innocent. They were just found not guilty. Horrifying, really. It is so evident, so obvious what they did. He was standing there talking. He could do everything. In a matter of minutes, he was dying in a pool of his own blood, and yet they're not guilty of even excessive force. That's unbelievable, unacceptable.
There are 2 sides to this story. You represent one. You have the officers and these defense attorneys, maintaining that if you watch this video in its entirety, that the officers were calm, they were not in a frenzy, that they were following procedure. Let me play this sound. This is their attorney, Manuel Ramos.
They did as they were told. They did as they were taught. We send these guys out into the night not knowing if they're going to go home, and we send them with instructions. And when they follow those instructions and they do go home, they're not guilty of murder.
Jury heard this whole case. We know how the jurors ruled, but we can tell our viewers that the FBI is continuing to investigate to see if your son's civil rights were violated. Can you tell me, do you have any update on that federal investigation?
I don't have any update other than just what you stated. I will be talking with them later today, though. And Barnett's interview right there, he was always alluding to it somebody else's fault. It was Kelly's fault. It was the training that was given to them. It was the policies that were in place. They weren't at fault of anything. And that's garbage, really. They should have been responsible for their own actions as police officers.
As far as that case, though, sir, this is over. I know you filed a lawsuit against the city of Fullerton. Your wife is already settled. I mean, you talk about the policies here. I mean, what do you want? You have lost your son. What can you get from this? What changes do you want?
I've already had several changes enacted in Fullerton. The police department, every member, even the civilian employees of the police department, have gone through specialized training to work with the mentally ill and the homeless. And many law enforcement agencies throughout Southern California have done the same. And, I have a platform right now, and I'm using that to make things better for everybody and to correct all these things that were in place that could allow this to happen to Kelly. I have a lot of law enforcement support, an overwhelming amount of law enforcement support on this. That's just not the way they do business. And, if I could, through all of this, help save somebody else's life, then it's worth it to do all this advocacy I'm doing.
Final question for you, Mr. Thomas. We now know these officers who were on duty, they are no longer serving. But if they were sitting next to you, what's the one thing you would say to them?
I would have something different for each officer. Ramos, he's not a nice guy at all. I don't know what I would say to him that'd be very, very nice and professional. With Sentinelli, I would want to know where he went wrong with his oath that he took and his professional standards, because I believe that Sentinelli was probably a good officer at one time. I know he's a corporal. He was testing to be a sergeant, and a lot of people have talked highly about him, but not. So where did it go wrong for him? I want to know that, and many other questions, of course.
Ron Thomas, thank you so much for calling in, and quick break. Back in a moment.